All right, here now with Micah Beckwith, candidate for Congress in the 5th District. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be here, Dan.
We
Thanks
appreciate it.
for having me.
You're somewhat new to politics, but you do have the backing of the Indiana Conservative Alliance, some well-known social conservatives, Kurt Smith, and former Congressman Marlin Stutzman as well, has formed a super PAC for your campaign. What's your platform and your approach here to try and win this very crowded primary?
Yeah, well, I feel like the Republican Party has lost focus of true Republican values. And as a father of 2 little ones, I'm looking at the future. I'm saying, okay, if we don't win the influence of the next generation, our whole world's going to change in 30 years from now. So for me, I just had this desire and this burning to get in and stand up for truth, really, and to return us to the values that our founders believed in, that the Ronald Reagan type Republicans believed in. And so for me, that's why I got in this race right from the start, is to fight for those types of those values.
How so? In what way do you want to see Republicans change?
Well, first of all, we have an influence taking over the next generation when it comes to like socialism. We see that there's an indoctrination happening in our school systems, and for me, I'm like, we have to stand up to that. We've got to make sure that students know why capitalism is the best approach, and why making sure that those liberties that were birthed on Judeo-Christian values are so important to our freedoms and our liberties. So, yeah.
You said in a post online, the founders never intended for there to be a separation of church and state.
That's true.
If not a separation, what do you want to see in terms of the way churches are involved politically?
Yes.
Repealing the Johnson Amendment?
So that would be one, yeah.
What would be your ideal construct, I guess, for church and state to coexist in that way?
Yeah, so when people say the church and state, they get leery. They don't want you to force their religion down their throats, right? Which is not what our founders intended or wanted. But what they did want was for Christian values to be the foundation of our society. For good citizens, we need ethical and moral people. And that's what our founders knew to be true. And so they said, hey, Christian values create ethically and morally sound people. And so they wanted that as the basis of our society. Our founders never envisioned for the government to come into the church. That's when Thomas Jefferson was talking about church and state in 1802 to the Danbury, Connecticut church. He was saying that, hey, pastor, you don't have to worry that the government would come in and tell you what to do. What he wasn't saying was, hey, there's no place for your voice in the public square.
It is a diverse district in terms of faith, though, right?
Yeah,
Obviously, you have a lot of Jewish communities, Muslim communities, and whatnot in Hamilton County and across the district. Does that approach, do you fear, exclude people?
No. And so here's what people need to remember is that even Patrick Henry said that the Christian faith sets all other faiths up for freedom and prosperity in our land. So that we're not trying to push faith down anybody's throat. We're saying, hey, the God of the Bible is the God of freedom. And that freedom will extend to the atheist, the Jew, the Muslim, the Christian, the Mormon. Everybody will be in that freedom zone, if you will. And I think but if we get rid of the foundations and the fabric of our upbringing, then we're going to lose those freedoms for all faiths and all religions. So that's what I'm pushing and making sure that we keep intact.
What other issues do you want to bring to Congress if elected?
Yeah, well, one, we've got a huge spending issue and an out-of-control deficit. Again, going back to true Republican values, the Republicans had control of the House in 2010 to 2018. And what happened during those 8 years? The deficit went through the roof. It was $10 trillion of debt, and now when they left control in 2018, it was $21 trillion, right? So doubled under their watch.
You don't think the party's said enough about the deficit lately?
Gosh, it's just, to me, we send Republicans to Congress to be fiscal conservatives, to stand and fight for social conservative values, and they get out there and they just back down. And I think for me, that's just what drives me nuts, and that's one of the reasons why I'm getting in this race, because I'm a fighter. I'm someone I'm not going to back down from the fight. I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to do what's true. I'm not going to worry about the political consequences of that.
When you talk about social conservative values, that can be kind of a buzzword in politics, right?
Yeah.
Are you concerned at all that positioning yourself further to the right on some of those issues could be a turnoff in a district that's becoming more moderate, perhaps politically?
Well, and I want to address that because that's what people tell me all the time. They say, Mike, you're too Christian and you're too conservative to win in the 5th District. Well, if that were true, I like Susan Brooks as a lady, but she's a pretty moderate candidate from a conservative standpoint. And she's not winning by blowout margins, all right? Her margins have gotten smaller and smaller over the last 8 years. So for me, I'm looking at it and saying the Republican Party, this is still a Dan Burton district, in my opinion. And if we return to those conservative values, you're going to see fire in the bellies of the conservatives just bubble up, and they're going to go out and knock on doors. They're going to tell their friends. And that's what's happening in our campaign right now. I talk to countless Republicans every single day that say, you know what, for the last 10 years, I just haven't been excited to go to the polls and vote for anybody. And now they meet me, they see what our campaign is doing, they see the momentum we have, and they're like, you are the candidate that we've been longing for a long time in this district. So I think this will be a 9, 10-point Republican district with that bold conservative voice if we put it up on the general.
Got to ask you about President Trump.
Yeah.
Obviously, he has been someone who has enthused Republican voters,
Yeah.
but not somebody who historically has probably been described as a social conservative,
Sure,
right?
sure.
How do you see yourself fitting in
President
with
Trump
the president
is-
personality-wise and policy-wise?
He's killing it. He's doing an awesome job. I think President Trump is exactly the bold fighter that we needed. Now, you're right, 20 years ago, was he a social conservative? Probably not, but man, his policies...
Is he now?
I would say his policies are. His policies are more conservative in the first 3 years of his administration than even Reagan's first 3 years were. So yes, from an administrative policy perspective, he's standing for prayer in the public square. He's standing for life. I mean, he was the first president that attended the March for Life. I mean Reagan, the Bushes, they never went. But President Trump is saying, you know what, I don't care about the political ramifications. He's standing with Israel. I mean, that was huge. Every president since Reagan basically said we were going to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but they never did. Finally, we got a president that said, I don't care about the political ramifications. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do.
Fundraising a concern at all for you? You did have to file some amendments reportedly with the FEC on some of the contributions you received. Will you have enough financial support to be in the top tier of candidates?
Well, those I always tell people that bad candidates have to raise a lot of money. Okay? Good candidates don't need to raise as much money. We just need to raise enough money to win. And for me, I'm a hard worker. I have a message that people are resonating with. We have the momentum. We have 100 plus people we do rallies. We'll have 100, 150 people come out to these rallies. I look around in this field. I don't see that happening. I see people maybe being able to influence and rally a couple dozen people at the most. And we are just constantly seeing people come out of the woodwork saying, hey, we're for you. What do we need to do? We don't have a lot of money, but man, we can knock on doors and we can get 50 people to the polls. You know, for me, I'm looking at those numbers just as much as I'm looking at our financial numbers. But yeah, we're not going to raise as much as some of these other independently wealthy candidates can throw into the race. But I think we'll raise enough to win.
But how do you stand out in such a crowded field?
Yeah.
16 candidates.
Yeah, I would say we're the most dynamic. I mean, every one of these candidates, they've, in my opinion, as a Republican, and I respect them all. I think they're very nice people, but they're not dynamic. They're not influencers. We have got to start sending influencers to Washington, people that can turn the tide of culture. It's not just enough to be someone that's going to vote for the right policies. We've got to influence the next generation. It's not enough just to win the next election. We've got to win the next generation. I can do that better than any other candidate.
Who do you admire in Congress right now that perhaps you'd want to emulate?
Yeah, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, guys that are bold. Matt Gaetz. I mean, those guys are kind of my political
Tea Party
heroes.
guys?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
kind of
they're
Tea
great.
Party.
Yeah, Freedom Caucus. Yeah.
Freedom Caucus?
Yeah.
You'd be a member of the Freedom
I
Caucus?
would, yes. Yeah.
What else do you want to tell voters as you try to make the case here before the primary?
Well, again, if we don't win the next generation, it's not going to matter what we do in this next election. So for me, I'm going to be someone that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. I'm going to stand on truth. I'm not going to think about the political ramifications to the votes. And guess, if you don't like that, I will have no problems if people don't vote for me. I'm going to go to Washington if my district chooses to send me there, and I will fight for as long as you tell me to fight. And I'm going to be that bold voice that I think so many people in our district, but also in our nation, are longing for when it comes to speaking truth and not backing down from this fight.
All right, Micah Beckler, thank you so
Dan,
much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for coming on.
It was awesome. Yeah, thank you.
We'll be right back.